It's time for us to continue with K24 this morning, and we're deep in the newspaper review. You can see even in the break, it doesn't stop. It just continues right here on set. Of course, welcome back if you're just joining us. Joined by Dennis Tumbi, Senator Isaac Mora, and Joy Mdivos. Look at the big stories of the day therein. As we took the break, we're talking about BBI being part of your performance evaluation if you're in the executive right now. Dennis, you are shaking your head as the senator said that they have agency in terms of doing this. That is, of course, Head of Public Service Joseph Kenya. What do you think?
For me, the conversation around BBI, first of all, is a very dicey political discussion. And the fact that it has suddenly morphed from, and honestly, judiciary sent their views to BBI. And one of the critical things they said is that Kenya has been back to the moon, up to the moon and back on the conversations about reforms. And BBI doesn't bring anything new on the table. And I agree with them. Because to be very honest, we have reports like the TJRC, we have other reports like the Kliger report and stuff that are fetching dust in the cabinet somewhere, whatever it is that there is, yet they have never seen the light of day. And so for me, BBI is for some type of political expediency. And the people sitting with those cars, the president and the premiership and thereabout. And how now it's finding its way without even being anchored anywhere in law. It's now finding its way into the policy doors of government. Is something that Kenyans should refuse technically, because that's a hijack of
Since we're talking about anchoring in law, we have a lawyer in the house as well. And for some people saying that, okay, fine, already as is, their performance evaluation had the big four, which seemed pretty big, a bite to chew. Now throwing in this BBI, that very many people are not, okay, fine, is this for us? Was it for them to decide how to move forward? What do you feel about this particular move to have them evaluated on the BBI, yet still so many contentious issues as far as to how it should be taken up?
You know, the problem I have with BBI is it's amorphous. You don't know what you're exactly dealing with. The report is not yet out. The senator says they're using the initial communique, the 9 points, right? But if you look at the 9 points, there was nothing like referendum in the 9 points. It was inclusivity, electoral justice, cohesion, nationhood. Yes. So, but now we are seeing referendum is a possible inclusion in the final report. So, in my opinion, what we may be talking about BBI and what comes out in the report might be two different animals at the end of the day. That's the problem I have with it. We don't know exactly what we are dealing with. And before you know what you're dealing with, I don't know whether we are being fair to our public officers to expect them to implement something that even we don't know what it is yet. One thing that I do agree with, there are some of those values that we really want, like promoting nationhood or patriotism. Those ones should be, it shouldn't be a part of BBI agenda. It should be mainstreamed. It should be something that comes without, as a matter of course. So by insisting and by putting it in, I agree. When you put it as BBI, it's politics. These are people who are running government policy, and politics is being put at the heart of it. In my opinion, it has some helpful aspects. But like I've said before, Big Four was already a big ask. And Big Four goes to the heart of what Mwananchi needs. It's our healthcare, it's our education, it's our infrastructure, it's creating jobs. Big Four, if we can even achieve a big one or a big two, would be such a game changer for Kenyans. Instead of zoning our efforts, because if you don't have focus, you don't achieve as much as you could. But at the same time, one thing that I see with the directive from Joseph Kenya is that the government is serious about this BBI thing. And if the government is serious about it, then I would suggest, by the time the report is coming out, let it be something that Kenyans can get on board with. Because if the report comes out, and then it's something that's again rejected, we don't want to keep having this back and forth of the government versus the people. Because we have come to a place, I think, as a nation where Kenyans actually expect more. And for the president, the point that Dennis was making earlier, this is a legacy term. It's not a time for a gamble. When you're in injury time, you play a tactical game. That's not the time to be shining and showing people how you can run with you can dribble the ball from one corner. Nah, that's the time when you do calculated shots.
You need to score the goal.
For him, I wish him and his advisors would sit down and say, okay, fine. So we've made Raila happy. Ruto is in a whatever space he can sort himself out. But now for me, what am I going to achieve in the next 2.5 years? Because he doesn't have long.
Right.
He needs to focus on delivering his own legacy as well.
Okay, okay. And of course, let's look at two of the headlines that we have, both in the Daily Nation and the Star, focusing on the Mau forest. Battle to save Mau water tower begins. That's on the Daily Nation's front page. In the Star, MPs telling Uhuru to give evictees land. They're saying that the Rift leaders talking about the fact that Kenyatta should donate family property to squatters. Clearly, very politically charged statement right there. But let's talk about politics of the Mau forest, because everyone is in agreement that we need to save this water resource. But the big question is, what happens to the people who are there, people who have title deeds that they say are valid, they did the searches in the ministries of lands, and it is indeed correct that it is theirs and they did the proper due diligence. Now you're telling them to move out of there. Let me bounce it to you, Bwana Dennis. How do you move forward? Because this risks becoming a very hot political potato, and at the end of the day, might not move forward as we expect.
First of all, if the government goes ahead with the threats, it will be a case of the government eating its own children.
When you say threats in terms of?
Evicting, the second eviction of the Mau.
Because they said it's starting yesterday and will end on Friday.
Yeah, so it will be a case of the government eating its own children. And why do I say this? Because if you look at the first evictions that happened in 2009, and if you look at the political process that has moved from then, if you look at the steering committee that was formed by Honorable Raila when he was the premier, and if you basically look at the entire that, what you see is a humanitarian crisis that is state sanctioned. Those guys who were evicted in 2009 were promised compensation. Up to date, they're in squalor in a camp somewhere. And then at the end of the day,
Senator, jump in on this one, that particular point in time.
no, allow me to finish. Allow me to finish. He'll jump. Okay. He'll have his own opportunity. The truth of
let
the
him
fact,
continue jumping.
Yeah.
Keep it brief so you can get a rebuttal from the Senator as well.
The truth of the fact is that if you look at the report, and the report had its own recommendation, that those who have legitimate title deeds should be compensated at least with 2.5 acres each and thereabout. There was a process and a recommendation that was put in place. If you look at Hassan Noor, the then Commissioner of Rift Valley, that was supposed to adjudicate this. And then there was abandonment at some point. And I remember that Honorable Raila suffered viciously in terms of his politics in the Rift Valley.
So do you
but
feel
nothing has been done 9 years later thereabout.
Do you feel the second phase will be a repeat of what happened the first time?
I think the second phase is going to be a larger political and a humanitarian mess thereabout. And there's absolutely disregard of human life. And that's a risk. So there has to be a process that this is done. First of all, compensate, then relocate. And then that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Senator, jump in on this one as well, because as you heard Dennis talking about the fact that after the first phase, his words, they were put in a camp of squalor from there. And if we don't look at what we did the first time, we make the same mistakes the second. What's your response to this particular, political hot potato?
I will say wow, because, hey, this is actually what you call, turning something on its head.
Right.
I mean, when you look at this headline,
from
this, is it the Star? Yeah. I mean, you would wonder who is speaking. Are these Jubilee MPs speaking to their president? You know what I mean? Like I saw my friend Kositani and Aaron Cheroyot. I mean, really, it's totally unbelievable. Those are the things that make some of us to keep quiet and watch, because I mean, there appears like every time there is political contestation, the fissure must move. So when Uhuru and Raila came together, the fissure became internal. And I've been very widely quoted as having said we were in a big tent and a camel came in and it kept on pushing. And it tore the tent apart. And I said, and I want to repeat on your show, that both Tangatanga and Kieleweke are going to lose big time. Because they have no monopoly of competition for power. At the base of this is Ruto and Raila, two serious protagonists who are what I call lions in politics, very much alike. And it has then become a class war now. When you hear them saying about the president donating land to his family land, it then becomes a class war. It's about the haves and the have-nots. And I've been to Masai Mau in Sierra Leone. We went there last part-time with the Human Rights Caucus, where we donated blankets and all of you. And we had a whole volume of issues, led by their leader, a gentleman called William there. And the tensions even around the Maasai and the Kalenjin, all of them, playing very, very, very strongly. So it's not a very easy issue. It also addresses the underlying, problems of land tenure systems in our country. And of course it is political. It is correct for politicians in Bomet to be seen to be with the people. And I also want to say that Deputy President William Ruto will eventually also stand with these people, because he is seen as a leader of the Kalenjin people. So he cannot be seen to be, of course, at first he must play, gentlemanly, he must be seen to be national, but eventually that's what matters, because then you have, people who voted for the government being, projected as victims. Right. At the end of it all, Raila Odinga said that even if it cost him politically, he was willing to stand out because he wanted to be seen to be an environmentalist at the international level. Remember even the negotiations in Paris, people like Ramadan Saif Kajembe, who was Assistant Minister for Environment. I mean, they were really trying to champion that. But then eventually it actually cost him because Rift Valley gave him the strongest, bedrock of support, and he had become premier. I was very privileged to serve in his office as an advisor. But then, what happened in 2013 when William Ruto moved to Uhuru's side? Raila Odinga didn't become president. Now we have the final. I think it's almost like some Mageddo of sorts, some mini Mageddo.
It's come to a head.
Yeah, it is now battle royale. It's either for William Ruto to survive and usher in a new younger generation of leaders, the Hustler Nation, or Raila to finally get to become president, and implement his agenda in the twilight years. So the contest is defined by this crisis.
This is how it plays out.
Yes.
Okay, Joy, let me bring you in on this as well and move it, shift it a bit from the political aspect as to how we actually solve this once and for all. Because as you know, as night follows day, politicians will politic on any issue. But for the people on this land who are being told to move because they have to reclaim the forest, how do we move this forward? And as we said, even with the BBI, have this national cohesion and not make people feel like they're being targeted and they're pawns in this bigger political game of the Mao.
This did not start out as a political game. This started out as a game of greed. There were certain men who were in power, had access to the then president, who could be able to tell him, you know what, there's a little strip of land somewhere that if you just degazette it from being forest, we could use it for Nyayoti zones. And they started with a small, it was it looked like a small game where they were just, would make some quick money and get in, make your money, get out.
Right.
And so when they first got this land, they got titles issued to this land, they knew it, they were getting in and getting out. So none of the original people who were in the machinations to make this settlement land are being affected right now. What you have is purchasers for value. What you have is innocent Kenyans who are holding titles given by this government. That is why what Dennis said earlier must always come to bear. This is a humanitarian crisis. We can talk politics, we can talk numbers, we can talk balances, but at the end of the day, it's a father providing for his children. It's a mother, a widow who has been left, and this is all she knows. With that in mind, then forget about the politics, the technocrats in government. This is the time now to put on your thinking caps and earn your keep.
Right.
Find out how we're going to crack this. If somebody is a purchaser for value, the law says if you're going to divest them of their land, whether it's for SGR, whether it is for some government project, you have to give them compensation.
Right.
That's the place you start. It's like the bare minimum. Finding them alternative land, like what the MPs are saying, why don't you give them land, you've got a lot. That's a very simplistic approach. When you've given somebody sufficient compensation, they're at liberty to find other land for themselves. So what you tell them, here is your money, it's come and it's on time and it is a market value amount, and you've got 6 months or you've got 1 year. You find yourself a spot and move. You'll find people accept that it's an easy appeal to swallow than saying, you know what, you guys get out tomorrow. Because the point of the Maasai makes a lot of sense. If there's drought, if there's no water downstream, they are suffering as well. Their economic situation is at risk. Kenyans are depending on that water tower. So the rest of us are also suffering.
Right.
But we cannot at the expense of these innocent, because these guys actually are not the ones who encroached. The encroachers are long gone. They're sitting, watching from a distance what's going on right now.
We're still supposed
No, but I want to ask Joy, you can't speak on both ends of your mouth. As a lawyer,
Why
you
is that,
must,
Senator?
because you must give us a solution. You have the short-term challenges of, property rights.
Yes.
Around somebody who was duped into buying into a land that was supposed to be a forest reserve. On one hand, who is suffering, and we can really feel about that person. There's a longer-term issue of our dried-up rivers. This is the biggest water tower in the country that needs to be preserved. So that we can move the country forward, and I really am following through your thought process because it's quite germane. You may also want to suggest to us what is it that needs to be done to resolve this problem. Because Isaac Ruto said yesterday very well that, yeah, let's also listen to Tobiko. He's a reasonable human being. Are there options? Has compensation been explored before? Has it worked? Is there money already allocated? You know, those kind of things, so that then we come up with a solution rather than, you know, we jumble up the issue so that...
Okay, we hear you, Senator. Because she started on compensation, saying that was the first place to start as a bare minimum.
Yes, but there's also something else, and he's bringing it out. There is the other aspect that we're also not looking at. There are people who've been engaging in illegal activities inside the forest. Those are doing it in collusion with the forest authorities who are going in, logging and tracking out logs. Because if you overfly the Mau, you see pockets of baldness inside the forest. Now, those aren't settlers. Those are, again, part of like the guys who delineated. These are guys who are going in for the quick back and getting out. So illegal activity as well must be curbed. And this is where now it's the technocrats that must do their job. It can't always be about... Because I'll tell you something, you'll get those people out, and we still won't have water. Why?
You see
because we have damaged the environment. We have to reforest it.
Okay, so it's compensation and making sure that it's enforced.
By the way, back in 2009, the recommendations were clear. UNEP came in as a sponsor to actually carry out reforestation again, and they pledged 7 billion at the end of the day. Hassan Noor came back with the implementation recommendation and said, for this process to be successful, we need 3.4 billion. And it was given to Treasury at that particular point. Whether the requisition went through or not is something that we don't know. Then there was a recommendation that the initial sellers were to be prosecuted. I mean, because they lured buyers at the end of the day. And also, the part of the people that are supposed to be compensated, actually the political elites who own tea factories there, over 1,000 acres, belonging to the Moi era. So the rafts and recommendations, and I'll challenge my brother here to discuss it in Senate or in his parliament, whatever. We have proper paperwork that was sanctioned by the state, that has the raft of recommendations, how this is supposed to be implemented. And unfortunately, because that document is not politically sound, in the days of handshakes and in the days of whatever it is, and by the way, what scattered this was succession politics. And in this country now, we're getting to succession politics. If you look at why UNEP jumped out, it was because they cited succession politics at the end of it. Why everything didn't go through was because of the political tangent that this went through. This is such a great move to save the water bodies of this country and thereabout, which were in a crisis, and by the way, but the humanitarian crisis over the years, like now Tobiko is telling people, move to where? In which way? So then you get into and the policy draft on internally displaced person strategy has been lying in draft form for years. So then we don't even have an act or a policy form. The recommendations are there, but also what we haven't defined properly in this country, and I think Senate and Parliament needs to pick up, is the IDP strategy, the protocols and protections and conventions and whatever it is have never been ratified. That today in this country we have IDPs, and that is what this thing has done back in 2009. That is what it's going to do at the end of the day, even though we are trying to save the environment bit. So this is going to take a political tangent, and unfortunately it's a good move that will collapse because we never follow any paperwork that we do. And
because this is a story we'll be following throughout the week, because I've said this is a week-long procedure as far as the government is concerned and process. We'll see how this will work out, even in terms of likelihood of compensation and moving forward. I know the CS will stand on this particular one.
I think the issue is political dishonesty.
That's what's at play.
Because when Raila Odinga invited Mwai Kibaki to go and launch the reforestation, Mwai Kibaki didn't show up. And because that time William Ruto was being courted to move from ODM, it worked very well because NIS had already identified William Ruto as somebody they needed to placate from ODM so that Raila could collapse. And it worked. It really did work. Now here also there is political dishonesty. Because what then needs to be ascertained is that if there were resources so allocated, were they diverted? Were there people who were compensated? There was a whole issue about the Kaptagat tea factory.
Yes, Kaptagich.
Who is the owner? You see?
Right.
So if you have the Kaptagat tea factory, and then you are the one who went there, and you are the head of state, okay? So you invited your kith and kin to come on board, and now then they need to be compensated. You know what I mean? And it's not just that. Remember even the issue of Wangari Maathai and Karura. So we must make a decision. And let me make this poignant point here. Lack of political ideology that guides our politics is a bankruptcy that is making us to be affected by this.
Okay, let's leave it at that particular point as far as this story is concerned, because I know when it comes to the Mau and of course what has happened, you can go on and on this one. Because of time, we have to move on to one more story before we wrap things up right here. And this one actually, even I have a tweet that came in from Kevin Kadipo. It's concerning the Kibra race, of course. Senator, your party finally gave its fronted its man, McDonald Mariga, for that particular position. Kevin Kadipo saying Jubilee can't get this position. Mariga is a politician made in a boardroom. Senator Maura.
Many politicians are many politicians
I've heard of test tube politicians, now they are boardroom politicians.
Actually, those boardroom and test tube are all connected.
They're the same thing.
Because even the presidency is negotiated in the boardroom. I remember like in 2013 when I was in ODM, 2012, I think we went to Uhuru Park, and Raila declared that we have agreed. And who are the people who had agreed? It is him, Kalonzo, Wetangula, and SK Macharia. You see? And they agreed that Raila was to be. The same case about NASA, the same case about Jubilee.
Right.
So these decisions are made in the boardroom.
Right.
You know, so it's neither here or there.
Right.
I mean, even a baby is made in the womb.
What's your take on this? Because very many people ask about
a baby is not made in the womb.
Because very many people saying that they should have let the people decide, they should have gone to nomination, Mariga and the rest. And from there,
but
who gets it
nominations have always been, one, expensive for the parties, and two, messy. And in this particular instance, I know Jubilee is in this for nuisance value. Because this is ODM's seat to lose, if we are really honest about it.
Right.
This one, unless ODM do something catastrophically
Which they've already done in Kenya.
this is their seat to lose. So for ODM, for Jubilee, this is one of those races. You're just in it for the numbers. Let's just see. And if in case we get you to know what he But in picking McDonald Mariga is very curious. I think they picked Mariga because of the brand. He's a person who's well known. You don't have to tell people who he is. You know him, he's well liked. But as we have seen before, being known and being well liked doesn't always translate into votes.
Right.
Ask Pius Muiru, he'll tell you a thing or two about that. And we've seen also George Weah now in Liberia. I mean, he's a former footballer, and right now the country is, they want Ellen Johnson Sirleaf back because they're like, you know, this guy is not working out.
Right.
So being good in one field doesn't necessarily mean you'll be excellent in another.
Okay.
But I can see why they picked him.
Okay.
And the rest will be juicy because, I mean, I've watched him on TV and I was telling someone, even just saying, Karibu Betin, it seems very difficult for him.
Dennis, let me have you know this
I'm
as well.
waiting to hear him in a rally to know whether kama kuna kitu hapo ama kama bado tu ni football.
Okay, Dennis.
The truth of the fact is that actually yesterday we were having a conversation with a friend of mine. We're in politics together. And we were asking ourselves, will Kibera collapse if they don't have a member of parliament? Perhaps not. And this conversation about Punguza Mzigo is really making sense. Because you tend to ask yourself is, of what value will an MP bring to the people of Kibera? That we've never seen that value so far. And even in the fact that CDF itself is administered, even it can be administered in the absence of a politician, technically speaking. But the entry of, and as I'm the vice chairman of a political party called Agano, is that we've been asking ourselves, is it of strategic value to field somebody or not? But the entry of Mariga, of course, is as my colleague Joyce, it is for nuisance value because then it heightens the race to be a flamboyant race. And the voter really is, you know, whisks left, right, center because of political whims and big PR campaigns and all. So Mariga is a fit candidate to make sure that they shake ODM. But however, the truth of the matter is that being a ground person in Kibera and knowing the politics in Kibera is that the people in Kibera are dying to have one of their own sons, and they want to make a decision. Not a decision that is pasted and bagged from the top down, a decision that is bottom up. And that is what the residents of Kibera want.
Fine. Because of time, we'll have to have our parting shots, 30 seconds each. Let's start with the lady, of course. Joe, what's your parting shot?
Don't forget to change your old notes. You know, you keep thinking you keep thinking it's the people with mattress.
People don't have tubes,
the 1,000 bob. you know, it will be the guy you have 3,000 in your wallet and you'll stukia it's October 1 and that will be 3,000 utawasha kibiriti.
Oh my goodness.
Don't forget to change your old notes.
There you have it. Look at your wallet this morning. If you have 3,000, please do the necessary. Bwana Senator, please. Your parting shot.
I think the contest in Kibra is basically about Raila and Ruto. And the idea of Jubilee not having a candidate, now finally there is somebody, is basically to measure, you know, to what extent, and of course there's a Luo politics there. Right. So it's just an extension of the 2022 succession politics. I wish the candidates well. I think there's a lot of value in having a member of parliament like Ken Okoth. There are big shoes to fit in.
Okay.
Yeah, mine will be on the Mau, and I'll ask CS Subiko to please implement the Hassan Noor committee recommendations. Right. That we need to think of humans first, even as we seek to preserve water. Think of those little kids. Think about the fact that there are students that are doing that. Think about the human suffering that has been caused from 2009. Implement that report, and I think that's the first place. Withdraw those police with AK-47s and really sit down with the leaders there and prosecute the thieves that causes mayhem back in the Moi days.
Okay, fine. We leave it at that. Dennis Thumbi, political and governance analyst. Asante sana for your time.
Thank you.
Senator Isaac Maora, as always, a pleasure. Enjoying Divo, East Africa Center of Law and Justice Executive Director. Asante.